All right. Good afternoon, Doug. It's been about 6 weeks since we've done one of these podcasts, but I thought it was certainly about time for us to check in, and if nothing else, to talk about what you anticipate coming in 2022. But first of all, how are you doing? Let's update people on what you've been doing for the last 6 weeks.
Well, I've been here on the farm, and it's been quiet and peaceful, which is not the way I anticipate most of 2022 is going to go. So anyway, it's just been cool. I try to go to the gym, which I have here at the house a couple times a week, go for a walk, go for a swim almost every day. That's nice. And read a lot of books, watch some podcasts and some YouTubes. I remain an aficionado of the teaching company's courses, which are almost uniformly superb. They vary a bit, but it's been kind of life as usual. Nothing new. Now, how about you? You're ensconced in your new gigs.
Yes. Well, yeah, I inspired by you, bought a farm here as well. And we're about an hour away from each other. And right now we have a big rainstorm passing over us. So it might be in the background. Hopefully it not too disturbing to people, but yeah, it's been busy here for the last couple months, trying to get things organized in anticipation of a little bit more chaos in the coming year. So maybe we can get into that. And I think, one of the biggest things that a lot of the people afraid of or expecting crisis over the last, over probably their entire lives, investing lives at least, have been expecting, gold and silver and precious metals in general to actually perform well. But as I was looking up these numbers this morning in anticipation of this conversation, and I saw that it feels like gold was actually down for 2021, but it was actually up about 4%, which basically feels down compared to every other asset in the world right now. But I'm curious, what do you think happened in certainly gold stocks were down year over the year on average. What do you think happened with gold in 2021, and what do you expect do you expect the same thing or something different in 2022?
It impresses me as a situation of punctuated disequilibrium, which is a term from paleontology, where everything stays the same for a long period of time. Then something happens and everything changes. So that's what the paleontologists say. That's what the historical record seems to show. But they're not the only ones that have observed this. I mean, Lenin, who I've tried reading some of his stuff. It's boring and turgid, but he has these brilliant breakthroughs once in a while, like one of his most quotable phrases. And I like quoting Lenin. It disturbs a lot of people that think they're conservatives. But Lenin said, let me see. Let me get this right. Sometimes for years, and then in a week, everything changes. Punctuated disequilibrium, or words to that effect, is what Lenin said. So, but we were talking earlier about this type of thing. Maybe nothing changes. And there's this French phrase, and of course, it always lends a certain je ne sais quoi when you quote French to say something in English. French phrases, le plus ça change, le plus c'est la même chose, which is more it changes, the more it's the same thing. Or let's be less classical and just look at what Gilda Radner said. And one of my favorite quotes from Gilda is, let me see, what did she say exactly? I'd like to get her words down right. It's just one damn thing after another. It's always so it's like that. Same with gold. So, okay. So we've had the last real market peak in gold was 2011, and now it's back up to 1,800, steady for a year. So I see it as a coiling spring. But, talking about gold, it's that, you look at these things from a historical point of view. I like to. And so gold broke loose from the US dollar in 1971. On August 15th, I was driving in a car and listened to Nixon's horrible, stupid speech on August 15th when he devalued the dollar. And it was $35 an ounce. Okay, so it's 3,500 now. Excuse me, it's 1,800 now. And a lot of people say, "Oh, you're so stupid having been involved in gold all these years. You would have been better off in the stock market." Well, yeah, maybe. But the fact is the way I've been involved in gold, the metal itself, which I've always bought in forms of coins, is I started buying gold way back then when I read Harry Brown's really brilliant book called You Can Profit from the Coming Devaluation. The book is still good to read today, incidentally. It's a great book. Harry was a great thinker. So $35 to $1,800. Well, that's fine. I've just been using it as a savings vehicle, which is the way you should use it. And it was very underpriced then. And as we speak right now, in my opinion, it's more or less reasonably priced relative to everything else. A meal, a suit of clothes, rent, I don't know. Gold is neither cheap nor dear. So it's not a great speculative vehicle. But that said, I think it's going to trend higher and probably, have a blow off top for a lot of reasons. So anyway, I still remain bullish on gold. That's gold.
Okay, how do you feel about the markets in general, more broadly, the stock and bond market? I mean, it's been seemingly going up unstoppably for the stock market for the last 13 years, bond market for longer. When does it turn?
Yeah. Well, bonds hit their bottom in 1982 when, depending on which interest rates you're looking at, the US government was paying anywhere from 13% roughly for long-term paper to 20% for short-term borrowing. And actually, that was one of the markets that I bottom ticked. I bought government bonds back then, and it worked out really well. I just wish I'd held them all the way.
Yeah, no kidding.
I could have held them. But, this is the problem with people that are bullish on the stock market. You sell too soon if it's a good thing. Anyway, so we've been in a bond bull market for 40 years, which is pretty unbelievable in times like these. But I think the worm is turning. So I wouldn't touch a bond with a 10-foot pole at this point, even though, interestingly, their junk bonds are overpriced, but there's some interesting junk bonds, I think, that have yields to maturity of 20% right now.
Wow.
So you can play with those as a speculation, but don't touch a bond. In fact, what I do to amuse myself, instead of playing online poker to amuse myself so much, is I trade commodities, just to dabble. It's very hard for an individual to trade commodities successfully because the amount of information that the professionals process and the people that they talk to on the ground and the computer programs processing all this stuff and the knowledge base, it's actually is overwhelming as trying to know everything about companies in the stock market. It's just impossible. But not that said, I still play with commodities, and in the last couple of years, I've done okay for basically walking around money. Frankly, I wouldn't risk a lot in the commodity market because I'm not a commodity professional. But where shall I start? I'm trying to be short, not short yet, the stock market, because at some point it'll collapse. It'll be possible to turn $10,000 into $1 million. in the commodities future market. We're likely to lose 10,000 numerous times. I am, at this moment, as we speak, I'm long the VIX, which is the volatility index, because I think the only thing you can plan your life around, chances are, and this year, is volatility, maybe ramped up to chaos. So that's the case. With the VIX at 19 right now, the downside being long is, I think, very minimal, because it hasn't been lower than 60, and I mean, like forever. So my downside's like $3,000. If it does that again, my upside, God knows what it could go. It's been as high as 60 recently, $1,000 a point in the VIX. So kind of an interesting, take a look at this trade type of thing. And what else am I doing? I'm actually short bonds by selling calls. I sell nearby calls that are out of the money. And generally, I'll sell a call when I can get $1,000 for selling a call, and expect that the premium that I garner, that somebody else is speculating on the other end, it'll expire worthless, and I'll capture $1,000. So short bonds. And what else? I don't think most people give a damn about commodities. Nobody trades commodities. I mean, this is like, it's like how many angels can dance on the head of a pin for most people. Do you think, or not?
I think you're right. I think people are much more interested in the FANG stocks and Bitcoin.
Yeah, you're right. Well, they should be interested in commodities, because don't forget that the whole Arab Revolution 10 years ago started off when, commodities exploded back then, and wheat was $7, $8, which it is now, incidentally. And the average Arab couldn't, buy bread, and they got pissed off. They blamed their government, which on the one hand they shouldn't, because what should the government have to do with wheat? Absolutely nothing. What does the government have to? Everything. So you should keep track of these things. I'm not doing anything with these grains now. They're all rather expensive, which, this is the interesting thing about inflation. It's that inflation has been a great thing for the Americans to have a little bit of money over the last decade, because it's all gone into the financial markets, making us feel wealthy. But now it's starting to filter down into the retail level, which affects people that don't have any money. Americans that have to, pay, I don't know what you pay for milk in the US now, or bread. I think they're both pretty expensive. Not having been in the US for a while.
What do you think about the fact, though, that last month there was a record number of Americans that quit their jobs? It was 4.5 million people walked away from their jobs last month. Not that were fired or lost their jobs, but quit, which is like the highest percent, 3% of the total workforce quit last month. And they're all mostly at the lower end of the socioeconomic ladder. And the big benefits paid by the US government anyway have already gone away. Like, it's weird to, I guess, make those two things jive in my head, knowing that there's this big inflation, costs are going up, the transfer payments seem to have gone down, and yet people are walking away from their jobs. It's very strange.
I've thought the same thing, and I don't understand it. I mean, the only way we can understand it probably is by going into the highways and the byways and talking to the lame and the halt and the blind who are doing these things, quitting their jobs, and doing what? I mean, I don't
Netflix.
know. Maybe, everybody's watching Netflix. I mean, and it's kind of fun. If you can just sit at home and you have enough to eat and you're entertained, maybe there's millions of people that have recently found out, hey, I can do this and get away with it. Maybe that's it. But, I've got to admit, I think I live in a bubble. We all live in a bubble.
You think?
I think we do, actually. It's increasingly clear to me. I mean, listen, we have a mutual friend, and he likes to tell the anecdote of being in a ritzy cosmopolitan club someplace and talking to this rich cosmopolite and the foreigner. And he says, well, Mr. G, we are all men of the world, are we not? Well, yeah, I guess so. But we all live in our bubbles, and a man of the world doesn't really live in a bubble. So
Right.
increasingly, we all live in a bubble. It's
That's for sure. That's for sure. But I definitely think that you have to assume that economics ultimately are going to force reality to be reckoned with. And you have to imagine when you have this food inflation going up, people abandoning the workforce, and so their income's going down, the subsidies from the government decreasing with these temporary things that they had in place, that it just basically pushes things closer to the edge than maybe anyone realizes. That it wouldn't take much then, to cause people severe enough pain that they might actually get off their couch, stop watching Netflix, and go do something about it.
well, that's absolutely right. When the basic things in life, like food and gasoline, become really expensive, and yeah, yeah, I punctuated disequilibrium again. I think this is the calm before the storm, and I don't know what the catalyst that'll set things off are. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it'll be something to do with this. And I like to believe that I'm the first person that called it a psychosis, but since Dr. I think his name is Robert Malone on Rogan called it mass something psychosis.
Formation.
I didn't call it
No, it's mass formation, and he got it from this guy Matthias. I can't remember his last name, but he's a Belgium professor.
Oh, well, I was starting to call it mass psychosis 2 months ago, and I didn't steal it from anybody. So, anyway, it's turning into that with some elements of the population. I don't know. It's the housing industry. Everybody lives in a house, okay? So they say that the average house has gone up 20% in the US in the last year. Okay. Getting back to commodities, which are the raw materials of civilization. I know that it's meaningless. It's as exotic as advanced trigonometry to almost everybody. But lumber has gone up from roughly $300. We're traded like forever at roughly that level. And now it's trading at $1,100 per. This is, and lumber is the major, well, one of the major single things if you're building a house. They're built out of wood, as is your furniture and everything else. So, yeah, this is all going to come home to roost. Anyway, buy gold, buy silver. Silver is especially cheap. I'm a big fan of silver now.
And silver really was hurt last year, whereas gold was up 4%. I can't remember what percentage terms silver was down, but it was something like 10%, I think.
Yeah, it's about let's say $23, $22 right now, but they produce about 800 million ounces of silver a year, 900 million, something on that order. It's almost entirely a byproduct of lead and zinc and gold mining. Not too much silver is produced from silver mines per se. Yeah, I'm a bull on silver. But the funny thing about silver is there's a certain coterie of people that are kind of in and around the hard money movement that treat silver as like the true cross or something like that. It's a one-way street. Well, it's not, but I gotta say I'm really bullish on silver right now. So,
okay,
what it's
all right.
worth.
So basically, you're looking for opportunities to short the stock market, shorting bonds by selling calls. You're long the VIX, long volatility, potentially turning into chaos, and
I'm short. I'm short nearby puts on gold and silver, which I'm expecting to expire worthless because I don't think they're going down. So that kind of sums it up. I mean, in a nutshell. So then we talk about the economy and what could turn commodities prices down. Let's say that there's a total financial collapse, which is entirely possible because there's so much debt in the world. I mean, it's all borrowed money everywhere. People buy their cars, buy their houses, do things with their credit cards. They don't have any cash savings. So, at some point, financial accident where melts down everybody's Robinhood account and they can't pay their bills. And and at that point, commodity prices could collapse. Why? Because people have to stop consuming, they basically have to act like cockroaches and, hide under the stove as opposed to venturing forth and being masters of the universe. So that's a possibility.
So it definitely could happen. But the catalyst for that would be financial in nature, you think? I mean, it would be a financial crisis, yeah.
Yeah, but a financial crisis could turn into an economic crisis. And economic crises then turn into political crises because everybody expects the government is in a position to kiss things and make it better and blah, blah, blah. Think the government's a cornucopia, the president can, it's totally sick. It's the actual root cause of the problem. Well, not the root cause. The real root causes, totally upside down philosophy and thinking, but that's the first order consequences. Thinking the government can help you. So, okay, so here's what I think. There's an excellent chance this is the year cascades from a financial problem to an economic problem to a political disaster. Okay. And of course, since we have actual Bolsheviks, actual Jacobins that control Washington, D.C. and many of the major cities, I mean, people that are, I'd call them clinically insane. I actually would. Psychiatrists wouldn't, but psychiatrists
are clinically insane themselves most of the time.
Yeah, they really are. They really are crazy. It's all made up. Psychiatrists are doctors that don't know enough about medicine to actually practice real medicine, so they'd rather sit there and talk to people,
And prescribe drugs.
Yeah, and prescribe drugs, exactly.
Yep.
And hope that whoever they're talking to gives them the foundation to solve their own mental problems.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, but I'd call the Jacobins that are in Washington and elsewhere now, I'd call them clinically insane. And they're going to do some really stupid, counterproductive things. Anything serious happens that will act as a catalyst for something else, you can count on a response from Washington, and they'll do not just the wrong thing, they'll almost predictably do the exact opposite of the right thing. So okay, so how will this thing compound from there? Well, Americans don't think about what happens outside the U.S. And but we both live outside the U.S. So you tend to be a little bit more internationally oriented. And of course, I've been kind of a rootless cosmopolitan myself for many, many years. So what is likely to blow up in the world first? And people forget that China is highly financialized at this point. It's so stupid when people call it communist China. It's not communist. The Communist Party, so-called, runs things for their benefit. About 1 million members in the Communist Party, they say. But it's not communist. That's crazy. People, they shouldn't use that word because it's just confusing and it's improper. It's China is a typical, somewhat more authoritarian fascist economy, which most of the countries in the world are. They're all fascist. And they have a big stock market. And, their central bank does stupid things, just like ours does. And their banks have lent, trillions and trillions of yuan. Yuan's worth about 7 to 1 or something like that, to these corporations, which have misallocated the money, like Evergrande. Everybody's heard of that. That's like a $300 billion mistake. And so their buildings get torn down, their bonds are defaulted on, their stock crashes. People that thought they had something don't have anything. So who knows how this is? It's like dominoes that are spread in all directions. And there's a lot of other Evergrandes in China. So, and maybe, I don't think that, I'm not of the opinion that the Chinese will invade Taiwan. What's in it for them? I mean, you know, it's going to be costly. A lot of things are going to get blown up on both sides. Doesn't make any sense. Wars never make any sense. So that logic doesn't have anything to do with it, frankly. I mean, if logic had anything to do with the world, men would be the ones that ride side saddle, not women. But so I maybe Xi will, find some type of an excuse to invade Taiwan and unite the people. Because I think before the century's over, China is going to break up into lots of little countries. That's what I think is going to happen. It's not a prediction, but I think it's a real possibility. Just like I think the U.S. is going to break up too.
Yeah. What do you think in terms of personal freedom? If you could bet on personal freedom in 2021, it would have been good to be short personal freedom. So it seems like personal freedom certainly decreased last year. Do you think that it seems like there's some breaking of the COVID narrative now, and people are starting to rethink it? Do you think there's a shift in store, I guess, that we might reverse course on the personal freedom side? It might kind of return a little bit in 2022 or not?
Yeah, it still seems like there are a lot of people that are COVID crazy. But I think the narrative has been kind of broken. Kind of seems that way because people can look around and they don't see carts going through the streets every morning saying, "Bring out your dead, bring out your dead." I mean, they've never seen that. It's never necessary. So, I think that's broken. But on the other hand, that doesn't mean that the idea of getting vaccinated, A, and having a vaccine passport, B, I don't think that's going to go away because it's just too good an idea for the people that like power. I mean, they're really neat from their point of view. So it doesn't matter if the average person thinks COVID is gone. Probably whether he thinks it's a hysteria or not, I don't know. But it's like the start of the war on terror back in 2001. So they passed the Patriot Act, and it was have to do it now. It doesn't matter what's in it. We got to fight blah blah blah, fight terrorism. It turned out to be basically a big nothing, totally a big nothing. I mean, unlettered Arab terrorists living in caves in Afghanistan, they really aren't much of a threat, and never were. But the war on terror stuck with us, and I'll bet that the consequences of the war on COVID are going to start with us. I'll bet they're going to start a new agency to monitor these things, and we need passports so that when something else happens, we can act more quickly and decisively and all work together, and these passports will help it happen. I think that's going to be the excuse. And, you've got these lunatics like Fauci that'll say, got to keep getting vaccinated and so forth. Maybe the Deagle people will be right, though. Remember Deagle a few years ago said that 2/3 of the Western world's population is going to collapse. And this was before COVID. Or was it? I don't know.
Yeah, no, it was. It was well before COVID. I mean, I think it was from I think that was a 2017 or 2018 update, I believe, where he said it basically decreased.
Listen, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist. Let's say this is more a conspiracy hypothesis. Doesn't even, perhaps not even worthy of being a theory. But maybe Deagle was well enough connected with various bad guys that he kind of anticipated that it would be kind of like a biological war, a covert biological war. Perhaps, I don't know. We'll know more in a year.
We will.
We'll have to.
No more. Yeah.
We'll have to dredge up this edition and kind of rate,
how much we did.
I hope I'm totally wrong and stuff. Let me go on record and say I hope I'm totally wrong.
Exactly. Are there any other major, well, not predictions, but like possible flashpoints or points of chaos that could occur in 2022 that stand out to you?
Well, I don't know. One thing that kind of really disappointed me, I guess it was predictable, was in Chile, which after they assisted Allende in shutting this mortal coil 50 years ago, basically it was 50 years ago, I forget the year, 73, I don't know. So Chile went from being one of the more backward shitholes in South America, albeit with really beautiful scenery and coastline, no question about that. But it was a nothing nowhere place. And, after Pinochet, who, is looked upon as the new Hitler and the devil himself and so forth, after he was demonized, but, he actually was responsible for making it by far the most prosperous country in Latin America. But, hey, that was too good for too long. And the average Chilean chimpanzee figured, no, we got to destroy things. They're not. So now they've elected a veritable communist. He's a real leftist, age 35. And he won by a big margin, not just a little margin, by a big margin in Chile. So is he going to actually destroy the country? I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say. He might, but then again, these things are unpredictable. I mean, but it's not good the way it's gone. So that seems to be a trend in South America. I mean, in Brazil, you got Bolsonaro, who, not the best guy in the world, but a lot better than who is that? That
Silva? No. Starts with an S.
Yeah. Anyway, so look, it's like in New Zealand. New Zealand was turning into a shithole gradually. Anybody with any brains in New Zealand got a plane or a boat or someplace out to London or Los Angeles or someplace. And then Roger Douglas reformed the economy much the way Allende did in Chile. Became, a really prosperous, wealthy even place. What do? They elect a communist. So it's actually pretty hopeless. Yeah, it's Lula in Virginia. In
Lula.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Yes. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But and he's running for election now from prison, basically.
Yeah, later this year. In fact, so who knows what's going to happen? I mean,
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe they'll have a civil war in Brazil. That's possible. I mean, it doesn't seem like it, but the leftists hate the rightists, and neither side wants to be told what to do by the other side, so they start shooting each other. That can happen. I mean,
right. Well, if nothing else, these political the elections do create flashpoints. So whether or not I kind of am of the persuasion or the belief that it's all uniparty anyway, and that it doesn't really matter who wins, and it's all trending a certain way no matter what. But for people, people are really tied up, their identities are tied up in these election contests. And so, when the outcome, when it goes a certain way that certain people don't like, that those do create those social flashpoints that we're talking about. So you're right, anytime those happen, that could result in something, who knows what, could get crazy. Are there other sources of flashpoints beyond that you see out there that could show up? Sort of course, it can't be black swan if you can predict it, I guess. But
well, do I see anything, or have I heard about anything that's particularly good happening in the world today? Well, it appears that various types of technology are continuing to advance. I see that as being good. On the other hand, it's usually the government and these praetorian agencies that, if it's really interesting, dominate it and get a hold of it and try to sequester it. Nothing's changed since the days of the printing press from that point of view, or gunpowder from that point of view. Both good things, but the bad guys always get them first. So that's a double-edged sword. What else could be good that could go on here today? Well, maybe, of course, I don't know how many people even hear about Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset. I mean, I don't know if the average guy in the street knows anything about that stuff.
In my bubble, everyone knows, but you're right. We all live in a bubble. So who knows what the average guy thinks?
Yeah. So, maybe, maybe that will all blow up in his face somehow, and we'll find him, but this is, this is just not truly wishful thinking. I mean, love to see these guys in his bathing suit. I don't know. There was a picture that got out of him in a bathing suit. It was like he would have passed for a weird transsexual, quite frankly.
Yeah.
So maybe he'll be hung from a lamppost someplace. That'd be nice. So well, maybe. I always hope for the best, but I expect the worst. So
yeah. All right. So any other thing that you find that's happening from your, just to wrap up, from an outside perspective, as somebody who's pretty in a bubble, sequestered from most of the world, that you find particularly entertaining about what's happening in the world today?
Well, what do we got? I wish we'd see more of Greta Thunberg, because it was such a great show she put on with what did she say? It was how dare you? That whole speech. It was great. So I'd like to hear more from her, because she's a comedy act without knowing it. But no, can't really think of anything. What you got? Any thoughts on this in general? Anything occurred to you?
I mean, from the entertainment perspective, I think one of the best things about what's happened in the last 18 months is that, in my mind, is that we're able to, there's a lot of bullshit in the world. I mean, I think that there's a lot of fake everything, from fake money to fake businesses to very fake people that you see. And I really feel like the best thing that's come out of all this is that, the tide is receded, and you see who's wearing a bathing suit or not, as Buffett talks about in general. I mean, people who you assume were of sound mind, you really realize under some pressure that they aren't. And, you see people's motives, sort of, I guess the expression is you've seen people take the mask off a lot. And I think that's it's entertaining actually to see that. It's sometimes very disappointing for people that that maybe from afar you might admire, but in a way, and I know you're not supposed to have this, it's a bad thing, but the German word Schadenfreude. I mean, I've certainly experienced that a little bit sometimes over the last year, when I see people who, kind of in their own suffering created by their own fakeness or falsehood, and seeing that everyone become aware of that. And I have a couple examples I could share, but I probably shouldn't actually. But so I've gotten some entertainment out of that, Schadenfreude, honestly. So that's about all the entertainment so far, though. But I have actually met, and on the opposite side of that, I've actually met a lot more very interesting people in the last 12 months than I met in the prior probably 3 years. And I think that's because people feel, people who are maybe of sound mind or feel way more isolated from the normies or whatever. And so it makes it easier to identify each other now than it ever was. And I think that's a positive thing.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because in many cases, when you interact with people that you may kind of like and you associate with them, when you start probing about their deepest philosophical views, you find out they're not who they are, who you thought they were,
right?
Or maybe just the opposite. So that's good. And there's one other thing that occurs. It's that this whole COVID thing, I think, is going to discredit big pharma and the FDA and a lot of regulations, because a lot of people are just going to look at it and they're going to have such a sense of cognitive dissonance that they're not going to believe these things from these companies and agencies anymore.
Right, and the best thing that can happen is they just stop listening to them. They don't fight them; they just start totally ignoring them.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm all for doctors, but doctors are basically good for severe injuries and obvious diseases. When it comes to maintaining your health, which is totally different, they're more or less worthless, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Seems to me.
Yeah.
So maybe that'll be a consequence.
Yeah, talking with Jane about this a lot, as somebody who she trained in that area, they're protocol followers. So it's like, here's what you do when, and so they get a list, they get a protocol, a procedure that they follow. And when they identify, oh, this is what it is, then they just follow the protocol. There's actually not much critical thinking, in general in that field. And that's actually, I think that's been very surprising to me. I didn't totally understand that. And I think that most people didn't understand that. Most people thought that a doctor would be like a wise, somebody like House, somebody who's a deep critical thinker,
Yeah.
who wants to solve the problem like Sherlock Holmes.
That's like one out of 1,000, maybe, doctors.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, mostly they're like mechanics. The guy you take your car to that changes the spark plugs, misfiring, set the timing, change the spark plugs. Okay, that's good. Glad you knew how to do that. It's the same thing.
Exactly. All right. Okay. So mostly you're, just to recap here, you gave a lot more specific actual investment recommendations than I was expecting, but the big theme again is long volatility potentially devolving into chaos for 2022.
Yeah. Oh, incidentally, that reminds me, there is one thing, and I continue to be massively overweight in junior resource stocks, especially oil and gold, gold, both, number one. And because they're really very cheap. They're the only part of the stock market that's actually cheap from every point of view. So there's a tip. And the second thing is, a few months ago, we talked about the stock that Jeff Berwick did a report on, which is called Cryomass. So I talked to the people in back of that, and stock has been weak. It's come off since then. I still own my position. I haven't sold any of it. Wish I'd sold.
Me too.
Wish I'd sold it then and buy it back now. Oh, that's great. W. It's not the way the market works. But anyway, the guys say that there's going to be a massive public awareness campaign. I hesitate to use the word promotion. And it'll be next month. And, when people, and also the company's prototypes appear to be working as predicted and well. I get this from reliable and I believe honest sources that aren't lying to me. Of course, you never know. But, or maybe they're just telling what they think is the truth and they're listening for. Anyway, the prototype's working well and it's all going to come together. And we'll see if Tony Weil gets lucky a second time. And so anyway, there you have it. That's
all right.
This is not unless everything works out exactly the way they hope it does, in which case it'll be a new Pfizer or something like that.
Right.
It's not an heirloom holding probably, but probably almost certainly. Anyway, just wanted to update on that because I think some people have asked, whatever happened to that little stock you mentioned?
Yeah.
Which is the only particular stock that I think we've ever mentioned.
Ever talked about? We never talked about anyone.
Just because Jeff Berwick did a report on it, and it was worth reading about. So anyway, if you like the report that Jeff did, see what you think now.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, good. Well, we'll leave it there for today, Doug. It's been 6 weeks. First one we've done in a long time. We'll get back to some sort of a regular schedule and at least offer our opinions on the world as it enters greater volatility in 2022.
Okay, fine and dandy. Talk to you very soon.
Okay. Thanks, Doug. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.